Well, and I know, like, I approach things from like the anarcho-capitalist marketer perspective, where it's like everything I do is looking at this from what's good for the customer, and I have a difficulty really, I guess, caring about intellectual property in some ways, because at the end of the day, if there's better and more books for the people that purchase them, is the world a better place or not? And that's a better world, objectively. Now, am I personally enriched by that? Not necessarily. So I can understand where, like, there's a, well, I invested time in this, and now I need to get my payment back on that. But that's, people have to deal. That's a very self-serving sort of way to look at it. And that's coming from the hardcore capitalist. Like, I understand that, like, we want what's good for the people, but we also need to be able to function. Um, but people, they seem to want to, I don't know, they want to live in a world, an old world, where, in a world that they don't frankly understand, because most of the art that we think of like as being from back in the day, it existed in a patronage model. Like, you weren't just creating because you wanted to, you got to create because some super rich guy thought it was cool to have you making things for him, and you do some stuff on the side that like might stand the test of time. And it's, in a lot of ways, it's just misunderstanding what the system ever actually was, versus like the what's the word, like, for the romanticized version of it.
Oh, definitely. And even back to Shakespeare, I mean, when you study literature and you look at the things that he put in there, it's like it's very clearly he was appeasing the royal family who was paying his bills. He was appeasing the new Protestant, religious structure that was going on in England at the time versus the previous Catholic one. He wanted to keep his head, so he changed his writing. And of course, he was ripping off Petrarch at the time. So it's like, look, it's never been pure. It's never been a bolt of idea from the sky. And then, it's yours and only yours. And then you are rightly rewarded for your creativity. I wish it were more fair. And then there's the issue of, having validation. It's like a lot of times they're like, oh, I don't care if I make any money, but they do care very much for that validation, which is valid, by the way. If you do it only because you want to be well known within a certain circle, or if you want people just to think that you're a good writer, that's valid too. But you kind of still need marketing for that, because people need to know who you are. They need to find your book. They need to read your book. They need to like your book. And then they need to tell other people about your book. So it's like you have to have that apparatus in place. And a lot of times, even if you have the money, do you have the time? So that's where the professionals come in.
Obviously, being a marketer, I talk to people all the time. It's like, well, I don't want to stop writing to do this stuff. But it's like, okay, well, then if you don't stop writing long enough to put together a decent promotional campaign, and you're not going to pay anyone to do that, then no one is going to come in who's a new reader, because they're never going to find you. It's going to sit as a PDF somewhere in a system that it just, no one's going to stumble onto this stuff unless you put it in front of them.
What is it, like 1,000,000 books a day on Amazon? It's like a lot.
It's stupid. Like, it's absolutely silly, the amount of books. So, our generation thing that we've had to deal with is, back when, that's why there was no superstar bands anymore, or superstar musicians, because, there's more than 12 people that get played on the radio now. Like, the sort of 60s, 70s, like, that was it. They had their names, they pushed them, and that's all you'd ever hear. Well, now there's all the noise. We have more things than we could ever dream of getting to, which is great for the consumer, in that we can find the perfect thing for us. But that's also predicated on someone getting the perfect thing for us in front of us. And if you just let it sit on your website, you're certainly not doing that. So obviously there's a need for this. What is the kind of picture that you paint in your book? What does that look like in reality for the standard person?
For the standard person in the book that I just came out, it's like, look, we're going to be very simple. I talk about copywriting, editing, and ghostwriting, how to get those started up, the nuts and bolts, nightmare clients, how to make sure you avoid them. Kind of like here is a much smoother path to starting to make money as a writing services provider. And the way that I frame it is, I do mention crowdfunding. I mention it right off the bat. It's kind of like, look, this is an option. And a lot of people have done this option. They've been very successful in crowdfunding. And I think that's more appealing to artists. Particularly, I know that you're, in the comic book space, where there's a physical product, like a beautiful physical product with art. And that lends itself nicely to crowdfunding. But again, we're back to the issue of social media and marketing viability. And for me, I have never been successful in those. I absolutely have to hire people because I'm just not, I don't have that sauce. And so if you want to make money, generally speaking, you will have to be useful to someone. You will have to be, position yourself that you are helping them make money so they will pay you money. And here are the three main paths that you can do that. And while you're doing it, you will build up your own skills. So like copywriting is the first one because that's very often the lowest barrier to entry. You can just start up a copywriting, with the skills that you have. So if you were a hairdresser in your previous life and you don't want to be a hairdresser anymore, you can be, a beauty copywriter. That's how you can start off. And it's a totally separate skill is what I do emphasize. It's not the same as writing a novel. It's not the same as writing a short story or a screenplay, which is why a lot of novelists like freeze at their blurb because that's copywriting. It's a separate skill. It's totally different.
Well, for me, coming like copywriting is I the minute I got introduced to it, I fell in love. And the thing I fell in love with is that copywriting. The thing that makes me excel at it, where a lot of authors have difficulty, is I can talk. I can write stream of consciousness. I can write conversationally. Being able to write conversationally is the key to copywriting because it needs to feel like a conversation to the person. Like that's the big part of it. And I can't tell you like how many people like you've seen authors have just like going in not knowing what they're doing. It's like, oh, you wrote a paragraph that's nice.
Yeah.
It's not really doing what it needs to do, but it's just learning a different skill set. It's learning how to tweak what you already know. Like most of copywriting, I think, is learning the psychology of how people's brains work more than anything, and then just kind of saying what you need to say to trigger the right things to make things happen. So maybe I look at people like rats a little bit more than most people, but
I think that's very true. And I think that's why I struggle with it. It's like, I don't know, because I'm not a persuasive person. It's like, do you want to buy this? No. Okay. Like I don't do the sell me the pen thing. And so I think copywriters really understand it's like, okay, well, what really inspires people where they're not even thinking about something? Well, I'm going to make you think of it and in the way that, you enjoy. And so that's a very different skill. And it's a very useful skill and you can use it any number of ways.
I was working on the chapter on the Johari window for my marketing book for nerds that I'm writing actually just today. And it's like trying to explain the concept to somebody. It's like, it's not a complicated concept, but to utilize it appropriately, and you know what the Johari window is? It's the idea of like you have a window, 4 panes of glass. And for every person, there's what you know and what they know. There's what you know about them that they don't know. There's like what they don't know and you don't know. And then there's the stuff that only they know and no one else knows. And the more of those 4 things that you can understand, you can build your avatar and you can pitch better people. And now in the age of big data, like being able to, there's parts of that where like that they don't know and we don't know, but the computers can figure out to make it even easier to sell. Like that's the real trick to what Amazon and Facebook learned was that, well, we can learn shit that people don't even know themselves. So
And that's what I found about advertising bros, like the ones who sell like an F ton of their books. And you're like, how? This is so mid. And it's because sometimes they got a touch of the tism and they're really good with that data element and they can just drill down and find that exact right audience for this particular book. And I'm always in awe of the people, usually dudes, who just like really excel at that, like that granular book marketing. And, it's like, can I hire you?
yes, you can. I'm over here, folks, if you need help. Now, is there a particular copywriting you say would be the gateway you think for a lot of people? Do you have a particular way you envision people finding gigs in that particular, like those first gigs? How do you see them coming? I've had a lot of people pitch me like the Fiverr and things like that.
It depends on your
I've
personality.
never had any luck with any of those. Those have always been terrible. Now, give me a friend on Facebook that starts me off. Then a friend becomes two friends, and then they tell people. Almost all of the work I've gathered in my private career has been through somebody that I knew and did work for, talking to somebody else. I could never make those websites work. Like the whole pitch anything. It's like, I don't want to do this. Like send out 300 of these for a gig I don't want. Like literally as a copywriter, like I set up a part of my website specifically to tell people I don't what I don't. If you don't like these things about me, don't bother asking me for work because I don't want to work with you. Like that's been almost a bigger thing for me. It's like if I wanted to have an asshole boss, I could continue doing the shit I've done prior to this, you know? Like one of the beauties of doing this is we can pick the jobs we want and just get rid of everybody else.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And how you get those clients, because in each of the chapters, the copywriting, editing, and ghostwriting, I do devote a section to client acquisition. Now, I am also on Fiverr. In addition to having my own business, it accounts for about 30% of my client acquisition. And then I get the rest, weirdly, from YouTube. YouTube has been huge for me. I make educational.
Second biggest search engine in the world.
Yeah, I make educational videos, and I have 6,000 followers, but most of them don't watch. I get about 100 views in the first 24 hours for each of my videos. And then after about 6 months, one will just blow up. So the memoir one has blown up. The developmental editing one has blown up. So it's like 6 or 7 videos in a matter of 3 years, just those. And those continue to get me business over and over and over again. That has been huge. YouTube is the reason I was able to go out on my own, because I worked for an agency called First Editing. That was how I got my start in freelance editing. And then I also got into Fiverr Pro specifically. Because when you first start on Fiverr, a lot of times you don't get pitched. People don't see your gigs. I got seen in a way that most people don't, because I had that website. I had that presence. I was selected for Fiverr Pro. So the algorithm was much friendlier to me on Fiverr. I've never worked on Upwork because I didn't get any gigs on there that were real. I got a bunch of scammers being like, would you like to work for me for free? I promise you'll get paid later. No, go away. Mm-mm.
Yeah. And that was kind of like, I had friends that's maybe 10 years ago made a lot of money doing that stuff, and they built careers on that. And because they had those careers maybe in like the heyday of when it was early, they had the website like them and it would, funnel them stuff. But when I was getting in, I'm like, I'm getting nothing that like, you're going to pay me $5 an hour to do what? Like, no, if that was what I wanted to make, I'm going to go back to my job working at the factory. Like, I can't do this.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I like to recommend being everywhere. So Twitter has been huge for me as well. I wasn't really active on Twitter a lot. I think my account was basically dead for like the first year I was on there. Then Elon took over and it was kind of like a party. And so I started, interacting more, and it was copywriters. I don't know how I fell into this copywriter algorithmic circle, because I've never worked as a copywriter.
Because we're whores.
Yes.
We like
big whores. And then y'all tweet funny, engaging stuff. So the two big ones that I fell in with were Nabil Aziz and Chris Orzakowski. And they, for some reason, decided that I was friend worthy. And then kind of I branched out from there, and I started meeting people and business owners, and I started getting work from there. It was just amazing. So YouTube and Twitter are like the big, client capture areas for me. I'm technically on Facebook, but does anyone find work on Facebook? I
have connections to people on Facebook that I do. Like, I find work because they're people like I've known forever and like they know me. But like it's just like that's how I talk to that particular sect of people. It's not anything to do with Facebook. Facebook used to be way better for everything, and it's become completely useless. Like I didn't even know that I would run ads on Facebook for anything, because it's just you have to pay so much here for your ROI. It just doesn't make sense. I say this. I know people. My dude that got me into all this, Nathan Fraser, is telling me I'm an idiot right now as we speak, but that's because he's just the genius when it comes to understanding how pay to click and all that stuff works. But for like the network effect, it's just terrible. Like, unless you are an expert at knowing how to pay per click, then you're not getting much out of it.
Right. And, I've done a lot of advertising.
Much friendlier in that respect. And I think it's because it is more of a social network. It just is.
Yeah, it's just to talk to each other. Whereas Facebook, like, I get random people saying nasty things on Facebook in a way, Twitter's got a reputation, but Facebook is where I get weird boomers who don't write and don't read for some reason commenting under my post. It's like, go away. Who are you? Ew. So it's
Well, I, that would have been my one caveat. If my audience I was wanting to work for was over 60, I'd probably go for Facebook. That's still their their place. And just having a thought, like, you know what? It's probably another reason you find a lot of copywriters is if you're on Twitter a lot. I mean, it kind of just lends to the copywriter mindset. Like, you've only got 280 characters to say something, so it's got to be informational and quippy. Go.
right. And I struggle with that because I am a long-winded bastard. When they came out with long tweets, I'm like, yes, finally, I don't have to truncate myself. But it was better when I did, because then it's like, okay, what is a hook? Do that, so people keep reading instead of just scrolling past your wall of text. And that's good that's a good skill to have regardless of what you're doing. And I did mention in the book, it's like, look, even if you don't want to be a copywriter, you do need this skill, because you need to convince people to buy your book. You need to convince people to come to your website, things like that. So, or write a blurb, offering your services.